Hello and welcome to EPG Pathshala. In today's paper on Women and Literature, I will present Paper 2, Module 34 based on French Feminism. This paper is written by Aisha Munira Rashid, Associate Professor, Aligarh Muslim University. I, Dr. Nargis Khan, Assistant Professor, Hamidia Girls Degree College, will present this paper on her behalf. In this paper, I will provide you a brief background of French feminism. Let's begin with a short history. French feminism dates back to the time of French Revolution with many movements for the rights of women. However, Rousseau's idea, which confined women to their roles of wives and mothers presented in Emile, remained popular in the political circle. A rationalist, philosopher and mathematician, Nicolas de Condorcet, believed in complete equality of sexes and races. In 1792, Olympe de Gouges, an activist and playwright, wrote Declaration of the Rights of Women and Female Citizen in order to expose the failure of French Revolution in ensuring sexual equality. In 1793, the Society of Revolutionary Republican Women drew attention to many crucial points about sexual and political equality. The feminist movement, with an abundant literary activity and a belief in sexual freedom, flourished in the times of socialist movement. The prohibition of divorce during Bourbon Restoration in 1816 led to 1848 revolution, mainly due to the efforts of feminists to establish a democratic and socialist republic. Nathalie Liebel, a militant, anarchist and feminist who participated in the Paris Commune of 1871 with a young Russian exile, Elizabeth Dimitrov, founded Women's Union for the Defense of Paris and Care of Injured on 11 April 1871. The Union des Femmes, or the Women's Union, demanded gender equality, right of divorce for women, right to secular and professional education for girls, suppression of distinction between married women and concubines, between illegitimate and legitimate children, and abolition of prostitution. In 1909, Jean Elisabeth Schma, a French noblewoman and feminist, founded the French Union for Women's Suffrage to fight for women's right to vote in France, but not until the Ordinance of 21st April 1944 for the French Committee of National Liberation after the Provisional Government of French Republic was confirmed. Women obtained the right to vote. Now let's understand some of the major trends of thought in French feminism. Most of the French feminists, whether they are materialist, Marxist, psychoanalyst, or even post-feminist, are concerned with the relation between the social and psyche, between social change and individual transformation. French feminism, primarily a product of political and social activism, has two broad channels of thinking. One is more concerned with material and social conditions and social patriarchal institutions. The other engages with psychic structures and patriarchal colonization of the imaginary and culture. In 20th century France, feminism has been an arena of contestation mainly between materialist feminist and psychoanalytic feminism. The early 1970s saw a consolidated form of women's movement in France, the movement de Libération des Femmes, or the Women's Liberation Movement. In 1971, Simone de Beauvoir, with more than 300 women, signed a manifesto published by a weekly magazine, Le Nouvel Observateur, demanding a right to legal abortions. In 1979, using MLF logo, and the trademark movement de libération des femmes, Antoinette Fouque led an organization interested in Lacanian called Psych et Po was founded. It started a press des femmes. Hélène's success was associated with the organization. Now, let's understand about some of the important theorists in French feminism. The first and the major one is Simone de Beauvoir. She is widely known for her social constructionist view of gender. Famous as a writer of the second sex, with Christine Delphi and Monique Wittig, she founded Questions Feminists, a journal dedicated to pursuing feminist studies from materialist framework. Beauvoir applied a master-slave dialectic analysis of man-woman relationship, which declares man as the essential, transcendent subjects of world and women relegated to purely immanent and contingent realms of experience. In the introduction to the second sex, which was published in 1949, Beauvoir asked the question, are there women really? A primary question founding the social constructionist view of gender. In Simone de Beauvoir's social constructionist view of gender, woman and femininity are created by patriarchal society. She asserts that woman is the other and cannot be defined independently, but as dark, nebulous aspect of man, deriving her meaning in her relationship to man. Now, this view entails that woman and femininity are created by patriarchal society to satisfy men's sexual, nutritional, emotional needs. She explains that the relationship between the two sexes is necessary for the continuation of both, and yet it is not a reciprocal relationship. She says, while men are the norm and essential beings, representing all that is positive about human endowments, while women are defined in terms of their deficiency to men, representing what is base, frivolous and contingent to human experience. She exposes the paradoxical attitudes the society has towards human life. On one hand, abortions are illegal even if pregnancy endangers mother's life, while on the other, wars that take human life are glorified. Simone de Beauvoir claims in her theory that women as a category have no shared history of oppression, no shared cultural tradition, no shared religions like other oppressed groups do. Beauvoir contends that all human beings are born free and must rebel against traps and oppressive social conditions to realize their potential. Beauvoir strongly believes that women can have fulfilling lives only if they transcend their role of tending to men's need. She also demands some legal, economic changes for women to succeed in their struggle against the patriarchal system. Another major thinker associated with French feminism is Michel Ledoux, a philosopher and feminist. Ledoux believes in philosophy without border. She is an anti-foundationalist and sees through the presentations of philosophers to purity by strict adherence to models or systems of thoughts as an attempt to keep philosophy an exclusionary and closed system. She also argues that the images the philosophers utilizes to build their abstract argument violate the rule of evidence in the system and make philosophy derivative. Now, to counter it, she believes that feminist critique is a philosophical practice which can root out the contradictions and paradoxes of sexist thinking in philosophy. Ledoux asserts when a feminist attempt to understand and explain women's predicament within a philosophical framework already available, they run the risk of importing sexist assumptions into their argument, which may be self-defeating. Ledoux argues further that by subscribing to Lacanian thoughts and other masculinist writers, feminists like Irigaray cannot check the malignant effect of patriarchal thoughts. She further observes that Irigaray, in her search for a language or of the female, ends up subjecting the plurality of female voices to the hegemony of powerful women in culture. Ledoux asserts that women philosophers and feminists must not use only one model of politics and philosophical framework, but rather be committed to an open dialogue. Delphi, with Colette Guillemin and Monique Wittig, started working on the theory of materialist feminism in the early 1970s in a reaction to radical left's reduction of women's issues to mere class struggle. Another important thinker associated with French feminism, Christine Delphi, she analyzes and she presents her analysis of women's oppression in French feminism, and she coined the term phrase materialist feminism to counter the form of sexism that ensues from Marxist analysis of capitalism. Materialist feminism is a reaction to radical left's reduction of women's issues to mere class struggle, which asserted that all women's issues will be resolved with the eradication of capitalism under a socialist state. Materialist feminism, the term coined by Delphi, she theorized that capitalism and patriarchy are two interlocking and yet independent class systems, distinguishes between domestic economy and general economy, and between two modes of production, the capitalist mode of production and the domestic mode of production. Those who own the mode of production appropriate the surplus product of which in capitalist mode of production. The patriarch of the family appropriates women's labor in patriarchy. The systematic appropriation of women's productive and reproductive labor by men is called patriarchy. In her two famous major works, The Main Enemy and The Familiar Exploitation, Delphi presents an analysis of domestic labor which establishes the basis for women as a class. Women's labor in the family is distinctive for having no direct exchange value. Women's services are highly personalized according to the individual family member's need and are repetitive and unending. Women's performance as professionals is not relevant. All that matters is husband's socio-economic standing. Materialist feminism is a social constructionist. Delphi observes that as a class, qualitatively and quantitatively, women's share of family resources, including food, is less, and such discrepancies are justified with the help of gender stereotypes. Materialist feminism is a social constructionist and is antithetical to theories that take difference as a starting point or makes any direct relation to the body as a source whence writing can originate. Delphi finds any assertion on sexual difference transcending historical and social context as a mistake, which conceals other differences like race, class, and conflates other categories such as sex, gender, sex roles, and sexual preferences, which are important to distinguish. Another major thinker who is associated with French feminism is Colette Guillemot. She is famous racism, sexism, power, and ideology. She, in her findings, provides an analysis of women as a class while engaging in a critique of all social categories, including women. She sees racism and sexism as parallel ideologies, both founded on a shared belief of natural difference. She further argues that appropriation of labor starts with appropriation of bodies. Women are appropriated as sexage, a term she used parallel to exclavage, a process of race enslavement. According to her, sex is not a fact of nature, but is a heterogeneous notion that refers both to anatomic, psychological givens and socio-mental phenomena. She argues that these two processes are based on naturalist, false consciousness, which is further responsible for limiting women to low-paying or unpaid jobs. Guillemot does not deny that sex or race does not exist. She rather asserts that these facts are meaningful only within the context of a web of social relations. She argues that the idea of race is ambiguous since it refers to both physiognomic characteristics and culturally defined social groups. Using the same analysis, Guillemot asserts that the concept of sex is not a fact of nature, but is a heterogeneous notion that refers both to anatomic, physiological givens and socio-mental phenomena. Monique Wittig is one of the major thinkers associated with French feminism. According to her, sex is not natural but a product of social relations which establishes heterosexuality as the natural basis of society and furthers a division of labor that assigns women a reproductive role via marriage contract. she advocates political lesbianism as a way of escape from this unequal social order. To lesbianize is to achieve genderlessness in language and society, to be able to engage in a subjective cognitive practice. Since a lesbian is neither man nor woman, she belongs to neither of the classes and is a runaway who can achieve a political subversion of patriarchy. Wittig's theory is called materialist lesbian feminism, for which she also considers important to expand the possibility of language. Her use of language aims at abolishing the categories of man and woman which underpin patriarchal assumptions, since language is a means through which conceptual and material realities meet, especially in a gendered language like French. Wittig, in her conscious subversion of genres and social structures, uses one as a genderless pronoun and inverted relational pronoun in order to allow emergence of a subject that is not bound by the terms of heterosexual system of signification. Another major critic and thinker is Julia Kristeva. Her analysis of women's subjugation begins from her analysis of language. All signification is made up of two distinct elements, the semiotic and the symbolic. The semiotic element belongs to maternal realm and means the organization of drives in signifying practices. The symbolic element, on the other hand, is the domain of control and judgment, hence belonging to the rule of father. The dialectical oscillation between the semiotic and the symbolic makes signification possible. In Powers of Horror, Kristeva associates animal realm with maternal. In her analysis, she describes abject as the necessity to assert borders. To assert its border, the subject abjects maternal body, which also results in rejection of maternal body. Kristeva associates the marginalization and exclusion of women with the attempt of human culture to separate itself from nature to assert its humanity. Insert taboo is an operation of abjection which explains dynamics of marginalization and exclusion. The marginalization and exclusion of women is the attempt of human culture to separate itself from nature to assert its humanity. Language and culture establishes order by separating from and repressing maternal authority, which returns in religious rituals, literature and arts. To her, art is sublimation of repressed maternal relation. To Kristeva, male artist can access maternal realm or semiotic without jeopardizing their position within a social order. Female artists return to maternal semiotic threatens her social position, which is already precarious due to her identification with the abjected body. Now, this means that men can be more experimental than women in their work without being considered frivolous. In an essay, Stabat Mater, in Tales of Love, Kristeva criticizes some of traditional discourses of maternity, especially the myth of Virgin Mary, for representing mother as a non-speaking being. Hence, we must conceive of a relation with mother as a social relation with a speaking social being. Luce Irigaray, another major thinker, This Sex Which Is Not One is her major work, explains that operation of Derridian binary opposition in culture works insidiously to shape psyches which believe that man is universal while women contingent, particular and deficient. She repeats the words of philosophers, inserts her own words between their lines to critique them and expose absurdity of their assumption concerning women. She focused on women being produced as other in the Western culture. In Speculum of Other Women, Irigaray argues that Plato, Plotinus, Aristotle, Freud and Lacan too implicitly privileged the masculine subject. And in her reading of Western canon, Irigaray reveals that matricide is core of each thinker's text. And about writing, Irigaray's approach is explained in Questions I. She uses mimetic voice within patriarchy as a mode of deconstruction male authority. Helen Sixus, her famous work, A Creature Feminine or The Laugh of Medusa, to describe something which has been raised through the privileging of masculine writing and speech over the feminine writing. From the perception of writers as bisexual in the context of androgyny, she reaches her theory of poetic difference. By shunning the label feminist, which Sixus designates a reformist political tendency to demand equality, she rather goes on to accentuate the sexual difference to form expression and writing the radical alterity of feminine sexual economy. Feminine economy offers a better alternative to it by generous gift economy wherein women continually gives without losing herself in the process. Sixus' theory of a creature feminine first developed in Laugh of Medusa. It entreats women to return to their bodies to ride their overflowing abundance. And she believes that women's speech resonates when the song opens into a volcanic laughter. Continuing with the theme of feminine sexual economy in castration or decapacitation, Sixus further explains women's repression and her repeated decapacitation in the history as a result of man's fear of castration. Feminine writing in Sixus' view is tactile, extremely interior, which can overturn patriarchal history with an overflow like maternal milk or outpouring menstrual blood. So that's it in today's module. I hope now you will have a better understanding of French feminism. For more reference, please log on to EPG Pathshala website and e-text. Thank you.